Dan Reed hated the ocean, always had. He hated its mystery, its vastness, and especially hated its romantic reputation. Since his divorce, there really wasn't much in his life that he did like. He didn't want to be in Italy, and the thought of investigating the disappearance of several tourists in an isolated fishing village didn't leave him wearing his best mood, even if one of those victims was a fellow NYPD officer. He kicked at the sand. "I can't believe I got stuck with this," he complained to his partner, Paul. "I want to nail this cop killer, but does anyone here even speak English?"
"Probably. We're not that far off the usual tourist path,"
Paul replied, shining a flashlight on the blood-splattered dock.
"God, it looks like they exploded."
Emma had been driving aimlessly for hours. The events of the morning were still tormenting her mind. Even though she'd calmed down a bit now, she still cringed as she remembered her explosive argument with her boyfriend, those bitter final words indelibly etched in both of their memories. There was no going back, nor to the job, that office of stifling clones. She'd never belonged there. "I've never belonged anywhere," she thought gloomily, and knew in her soul it was true. A melancholy soprano lilted from the car speakers. Her city had been left far behind. Emma suddenly realized that after hours of soothing autumnal gold greenery, she'd no idea where she was. It was almost as if the car had been driving itself. Petrol was low, and she was tired.
Still it rages. Weary, the king stood poised at the edge of his cot at the end of the world. In another time, he might have been declared an avenging angel, perhaps even a savior. Not now. Outside, the stalemate on the devastated heath held fast as the frenzied yelping of berserkers punctuated the insensible nattering of unexpected amputees. How has it all come down to this? He paced anxiously in the confined comfort of his tent, knowing this final skirmish would decide the future. If we fail now, there is nothing to be grateful for. My arrogance and covetousness would have derailed everything that I've worked for. He sat on the tattered cot, knowing he should rest, but resisting the call of sleep. After a few more moments, he lay down at last and closed his burning eyes, visions painting the insides of his eyelids a gruesome tableau. If we are vanquished, all will be lost forevermore.
It started with the discovery of a new bookstore. I'm not talking about one of those modern ones that have all the latest drivel from the major publishing houses, not the ones that publish books so banal you forget them seconds after reading the last page. I refer to the more uncommon type of bookstore that has its books stacked willy-nilly about the place, pungent with that delightful aroma of old tomes. Those small shops blessed with old histories and older personalities. The proprietor was one of those elderly men so commonly found in those antiquated bookstores. Owners not so much motivated by the bottom line of a financial statement, but by the passion of their first love. Their checkout counters groan under the weight of books stacked without evident order, and they hover over their treasures like old dragons guarding ancient hoards. The owner looked up at me as I entered. He smiled, nodded, and after a quick question as to whether I was looking for something specific, he went immediately back to his own reading. I had an hour before I had to be at my chosen destination, and for me, a bookstore served as the best diversion one could find.
Amy always hated driving through the Barrens and avoided it as often as she could. Each time she was forced to, images from countless news shows invaded her mind. She was not overly sensitive or sentimental, but she didn't understand how people could possibly conduct their normal day-to-day lives in this area after the riots. Nobody was sure what triggered the riots, but they were all pretty sure that it started in the Barrens, a poor, run-down section of the city where nobody walks anywhere alone or unarmed. and the locals are like meerkats in their nervousness, sticking their heads out of run-down houses before quickly pulling back, doors slamming. The Barrens was also where the riots were the most violent, and for days the television news was full of images of death. When the riot finally abated, it was days before people could return to their homes without stepping over wreckage, both manufactured and human. Yet here Amy was, driving down Terrace Road, at night nonetheless, just to shave a few minutes off her travel time. Her alarm hadn't gone off, and she was already a few minutes late for her shift at the Raven, a small goth club at the opposite edge of the Barrens from where she lived.
A building burned on the edge of town. An empty warehouse set alight in the early hours of the morning. Scarlet was drawn like a moth to the blaze, her whole body overwhelmed by the desire to bask in the heat, feel the flickering flames against her skin. The building was already ringed by rubberneckers waiting for the firefighters to arrive, and she had to slip through the crowd to get close. Orange and gold tongues of fire licked at the old brickwork through shattered windows and broken doors. Scarlet smelt the faint reek of gas in the air. Something had exploded inside the warehouse. She edged closer, soaking in the light and fury of the fire. Something inside the building was screaming.
The daylight's termination meets her at the grave. Her hair is gold, her footsteps light. Her eyes are blue and tearfully bright.
I grasped the amulet in my hands, trying to muster the courage to use it. My second in command, Iria Delaska, stood to my right. Her lavender eyes analyzed the markings on the stone disc, trying to figure out their meaning. "Are you sure this will work, Daevid?" she asked, her voice raspy from an old neck injury. The scar was a violent red slash across her milk-white throat. Usually she wore her black hair in a way that covered it, but today she had it pulled back in an intricate braid. She wore the emblem of the Unseelie Court on her bicep, the silver tracings in it marking her as royalty. If her husband, Fey King Micah of the Unseelie Court, knew that she was a member of Daer Shola, we'd all pay with our lives for putting a member of the royal family in harm's way.
He was standing there, just staring into the nothingness, pure and beautiful. His skin was so white you would have thought it was transparent. He took a step towards me, his great white wings so huge they almost wiped the sky and the earth at the same time. Such a delicate face, soft features, tender eyes and loving mouth.
The promotion had come suddenly, when the old head of department had mysteriously disappeared, and within 2 weeks Robinson was living in London. He didn't know anyone, and that was why he had accepted Vostok's invitation to dinner. Vostok was one of the programmers. He was a nearly bald, middle-aged loser with patches of greasy black hair above each ear, who wore, every day, a fading charcoal suit. The only time they'd spoken was when Robinson approached him about the new career development plans. Every employee should try and become rounded, developing a repertoire of skills, technical, communicative, and interpersonal. "Rubbish," Vostok had blurted. "Excuse me." Robinson had been shocked. He didn't want to antagonise anyone, but this was a lack of respect.